It's a cosign, no sign kind of Thursday here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like you want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling on a Thursday?
Not too bad. Just hoping we get some news to talk about. We just really haven't had much.
Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot.
Vibe behind you, though. I'm just gonna say.
What's that?
Digging the purple vibe.
Oh yes, I'm back in Niagara for the week. So I'm in my brother's studio, and these Gen Zers, they believe that they need to have like purple backlit studio. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, sure. I guess it looks okay. Looks decent. Don't get used to it. Not going to be putting this in my bedroom when I'm back in Toronto. So you can watch it today and on tomorrow's show. And then you'll probably go back to seeing the usual background. So it's a day that we decided we're going to do some cosign, no sign. We haven't done this in a little bit. It's been a couple weeks since we played cosign, no sign, but it's a really fun time for us to kind of just get the creative juices brewing and try and bring some topics to the table and have some good discussions about the Maple Leafs, about the NHL. So let's get into it. Let's start off with that, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the news out in Edmonton, a controversial hire that was made earlier on Wednesday. We could talk about that in a little bit, but let's kick things off with some cosign, no sign. And why don't you go first, Dave? Let's stay leafy with our first one.
Okay, so mine will deal about another contract. The Leafs, like we're talking about contracts they got to look at going forward. Matthew Knies. The Leafs should be looking to get Matthew Knies signed to a new deal sooner rather than later.
Oh, 100% cosign. 100% cosign. I mean, I think that Matthew Knies is going to be a terrific player. And, if you can time it right where you extend him to like a 2-3 year contract and maybe a little bit of a bridge-ish deal, perhaps, you can get him on a bit of a cheaper rate. It will be interesting to see what they decide to do with him, though. But you can either sign into a short-term deal, 1, 2, 3 years. You go medium, 4, 5, or you can sign to the long-term deal and lock him up, for 6, 7, 8 years. We've seen multiple teams go in multiple different directions on this. But just in terms, should the Leafs prioritize, maybe not prioritize, but should they get him signed to a deal as quick as they can? Yeah, I think that would be the case because I think he's going to have a pretty good season. So I think you'd be better off having that. Having those negotiations this summer before he has a bit of a breakout next year that he could potentially have, as opposed to having these next summer when he is a restricted free agent and he's got another full season in his back pocket to use for negotiations. So yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely get it done. What would you like that contract to look like, though?
See that, and I listened to this. Actually, Steve Dangle kind of discussed it on his podcast, and this is where kind of my thought was about it. Like, you can sign him to that bridge deal, and I would be fine with that. But I'm also like, if you can get him to a 4-year or 5-year deal, maybe. But I don't know if I heard
walking to free agency again. You walking everyone to free agency.
Well, see, that's my only issue with that. Like, as you said, like walk to free agency. I don't like that idea. So I guess if you do the 2 or 3 year deal, you still have them as an RFA. That's probably the better route when you look at your cap structure and you're trying to maintain some sort of leverage for him. I just know some people are like, oh, but if you don't get him signed now and he really breaks out, then you're gonna have to really pay him. And I'm like, Well, then that's kind of a good thing if he really breaks out, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Good
Max, I would like to do the 3-year deal if that. I haven't really looked at the full, like, I think that's he would still have RFA eligibility, so I would do that 3-year deal, and then I think a deal like that's going to come in what, the $3 to $4 million range,
probably in that realm, I would think. Like, didn't like Lafreniere sign something in that range, I believe, maybe even Capo Caco, like a 2-year deal, just to get a contract done, and then kind of bet on themselves that in a couple of years that they do break out into that star and they can go back to the negotiating table. So I would think that, yeah, you probably get somewhere in that range, 3.25, 3.5 on a short-term deal. And then it only goes up from there the more term you give the guy. So I would think it would probably be somewhere in that range.
Lafreniere got 4.65 over 2 years.
That's a number 1 overall pick, right? And someone who
he had a good year. Like, he was, what did he have? Like 57 points last year, 28 goals.
Yeah, but he signed that deal, I believe, last summer before that happened. I believe.
I'm just looking here. Yeah, like in like late in the summer, I think is when he signed.
Yeah, so it's before the breakout season, which is what you're talking about for Matthew Knies, right?
Yeah.
Try and get him signed to that deal before the breakout, so you can get him on a nice little cheap deal for a couple of years, maybe even long term. If you give him 4 or 5 years, maybe you pay a little bit up for that. But certainly, I think he's a piece of the core going forward. I think that he's an excellent player. So yeah, absolutely, sign me up to get that contract dealt with sooner rather than later. All right, my Leaf-related cosign, no sign. Matt Murray will play more NHL games than Jack Campbell.
I'm going to no sign that. And the reason why is, I'll get back myself into a corner here with this statement, but the Red Wings have had a real issue with goaltending injuries.
Yeah.
The
Leafs haven't.
That was kind of my point, and I'm backing myself into a little bit of a corner by saying that. But I also just think that it wasn't just Alex Lyon didn't start playing a lot of games, not just because of the injuries, also because the rest of the goaltenders on the Red Wings stunk.
Yeah.
And so
they've got like 4 goalies though. Like they've got Lyon, they've got Husso, they've got Cam Talbot and Jack Campbell.
I forgot about Cam Talbot. Damn. Okay. Maybe I switch up I forgot about Cam Talbot. So I might co-sign that at Matt Murray now, because at least there's more of a visible path for him.
Let me give you an over-under on Matt Murray for games played. 7.5.
I'm gonna go. Oh yeah, I'll take the over on that. I think he could play like 10 games.
Yeah, and that's pretty much because we don't know if Joseph Woll is going to be able to stay healthy for a whole season.
Yeah.
And Anthony Stolarz has never proven to be a number 1 where he can handle a big bulk of the load. So, if Woll misses any time, you're going to end up seeing this guy come up and he's going to have to play games. I mean, do you remember how many games that we saw out of Martin Jones last year? Top of your head, take a guess.
Like 19?
Close. 22. He was the 3rd goaltender. He played 22 games for the Maple Leafs last year.
He went on like a streak of playing like 10 straight or something like that.
Well, because Samsonov was out, Murray was out, Woll was out. So it was like him, and then they brought up Dennis Hildeby, but they decided to play Martin Jones in like back-to-back games. Remember they gave him that back-to-back in Anaheim instead of letting Hildeby play?
Yeah.
And he ended up playing, like 22 games last year. It's insane. So, I mean, I could see maybe not 22, but I could certainly see Matt Murray suiting up for more games than you would have thought of, 6 weeks ago for the Maple Leafs next season. So something to think about and just keep an eye on. Matt Murray could be part of the crease for the Maple Leafs next year more than you think. All right, we'll continue with our cosign no signs on the other side. We got a couple league-wide cosign no signs, which will go with our discussion about the Oilers' controversial hiring of Stan Bowan. We'll get our thoughts on that on the other side as well. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, love them so much, I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sports like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All you got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Big fan of the Blue Jays. Go ahead. Fade the Blue Jays because they can't win a game to save their lives, but at least you can make it profitable over on FanDuel. So head to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here on a Thursday. Hope everyone's doing well. We ask if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast that you do. You can find us wherever you get your podcast at, Spotify, iTunes, wherever, and also up on YouTube, of course. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Leave us a comment down below as well. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Matthew Knies situation. And I'm also curious to get your thoughts on this next conversation we're going to have. Dave, you gave me a little tease as to what one of your league-wide cosign no signs was going to be. Give me the full thing. What exactly is the full cosign no sign, brother?
The NHL should adopt an NFL-like top 100 players list every offseason before the new season.
Oh, 1,000% cosign. What would be the argument against doing this, realistically? I don't think anyone's going to have any issue with this one.
Fans won't have any issues.
The NFL top 100 is... Yeah. No, fans won't have issues. Oh, you think the players are going to have the issues?
Yeah, I think so. Like, the thing is, players do polls. Like, the NHLPA releases polls throughout the year. So yes. I'm always surprised they never do one like the NFL does.
Well, yeah, because if you are unfamiliar with the NFL top 100, every player in the league gets a vote, and they vote their top 100 players. They kind of videotape them sometimes, and they ask them their opinions on certain players, and they talk about them. They talk about plays, and then they release them, 10 players at a time, and they make a big show and a big production about it that goes on NFL Network. Could the Maple Leafs do something, or the NHL do something? Maybe this is something like with Amazon now picking up an extra series with the NHL. Maybe it's something that Amazon could do, right? Like, the NHL doesn't have their own network like the NFL, so they don't have to come up with all this content. But if you do have someone who wants to partner like Amazon with the NHL, maybe they take on this project. But I think for sure that'd be awesome to have, a players poll. Like, we get an idea of who people think are the best just based on the votes. I guess we get a percentage of who voted who, but we don't have a full top 100 for us to sit there, pick apart, and debate who was too high, who was too low. But I think it'd be awesome to find out where the players stand on, the guys who are playing in the league. I think that would be awesome for the NHL to adopt that for sure.
Yeah, like the part that really it brings up such great conversations, first and foremost. There's certain players on the NFL's top 100 list, because we talk about certain players all the time as football fans. When there's players that maybe don't get a lot of talk, a lot of the spotlight, the players then go up. It's kind of the players' way of saying like why aren't we talking about this guy as a top player in the league, right? So it's their ability to just put a guy out there like that, and it's just great conversation. I had somebody message me in my work chat and just be like, how did Aaron Rodgers, who played all of 10 minutes, make the NFL 100 list? And I'm like, there's players in the league that still they don't take one season of an Aaron Rodgers injury and be like, yeah, that guy is done.
Yeah. Part of the issue too with this stuff is sometimes they don't necessarily know are they voting for the past season? Are they voting for the season upcoming? It is a little
Yeah.
murky as to what they're voting for sometimes. Like I remember Peyton Manning missed the entire year. He ended up at 50 on the list because they're like, well, he didn't play, but like the team also was absolute dog crap. So like, is he one of the best 100 players? Because the team went from being like a Super Bowl contender to the first overall pick and had a 2-14 year, and then next year will probably go on to be a Super Bowl contender again. So it's a little bit murky when they do that, but hopefully the NHL could try and fix it. Be like, no, you're voting on this past season or you're voting on the upcoming season. I mean, TSN does their list every year. They do the top 50 list with.
I think the Hockey News. I used to get the magazine, and they used to do the top 100. Like they used to do a top ranking.
Yeah, they probably still do actually. But the players, we want to hear from the players themselves, and not just the players poll where you hear the percentages from the NHLPA. I want a full production, and I want to know a full ranking 1 through 100. I want to pick it apart. I want to make fun of it because that's the kind of content we need in the summer too. So selfishly, it'd be great. Like I don't know if you saw ESPN last week was putting out
that was my other reason for this.
Yeah, so they're putting out a top 100 influential. I think it was top athletes of the 21st century. I think it was, and man, I spent a lot of days on Gameplay arguing that list. They gave the biggest middle finger to hockey. Then we had 3 hockey players, and they had Connor McDavid at 98. Connor McDavid at 98 for influential athletes of the 21st century. Come on. Absolutely ridiculous. Like Ovi wasn't even top 50. And then I think they had Crosby at 22. But like Kevin Garnett was number 3. And they had like Ovechkin and Bedard or McDavid way behind. It was an outrageous list. But anyways, gives us something to poke fun at though. So I'm all for it. Absolutely, give me that.
Yeah, I was I was not like I looked at the ESPN ranking of like I think it was like top 100 professional athletes of the 2000s. Crosby was 22.
Yeah,
like. Are we like what are we doing here? Like there were a lot of not just American, but like American like athletes, but like also like Olympic athletes that got.
Dude, I don't think that's as outrageous as McDavid at 98. Though.
Yeah, no, it's not. Like I think it's nice that Crosby at least made a top 30, like the top 30 of that list. But yeah, I know like you look at some of these lists here, and like it's clearly also just. Maybe putting a spotlight. It's also these lists are meant to like really bring up again discussions. So that's why I think I would love a list like this from the NHL, so we can either tear it apart and be like, what are the players thinking, or also like, maybe the players are onto something.
Absolutely. All right. Why don't we take one more quick break? We'll come back and I'll give you my final cosign, no sign. And then we'll get into the controversial news out in Edmonton on Wednesday. That's still to come here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we continue with a cosign, no sign here on a lovely Thursday. So, a lot of fine tuning is being done here with the rosters, and the Maple Leafs got Connor Dewar signed to a deal the other day. They still got one guy remaining in Nick Robertson, but I was curious, all right, what other big time RFAs are still unsigned that we're kind of waiting on? And there's a lot of them, Dave. There's a lot of pretty solid RFAs that still need a contract this upcoming season. We're talking Jeremy Swayman is still unsigned. Lucas Raymond is still unsigned. Yeah. Marty Nakash, Matt Berniers, Mo Sider, Phil Broberg, Cole Perfetti, Dylan Holloway, Thomas Harley. There is a lot of really, really quality, talented players that are still unsigned and are restricted free agents. And my cosign, no sign to you, Dave, is at least one of these RFAs will either hold out training camp or be dealt by training camp.
I'm gonna gonna co-sign that one of them, and that one's gonna be Marty Nikash. I think like he's the one that's been there's been a lot of talk about how he's not happy with in Carolina, and there's some potential issues about him even wanting to sign there. So like, he's the one I'm kind of keeping my eye on, because like the Red Wings are going to sign their guys. Like those are foundational players. Jeremy Swayman, like the Bruins have to sign him. Like he is their most important player.
I'll say this: I didn't realize. I guess I don't know, I didn't think about it. I suppose, but kind of ballsy for them to trade away Omar before getting Swayman dealt with. No,
Oh yeah. A lot of people were talking about that in Boston. Like, how can you trade Allmark without securing your number one goaltender?
Yeah.
Right.
Now he's got a little bit more leverage, right? It's like,
yeah,
you're going to be playing a hell of a lot more than you did before. Now that number's going up.
Leverage, and we know the relationship between Allmark and Swayman. Like those guys were like
Tight.
the bromance, right? Like that's not an easy situation. I mean, look, it's also them saying like, well, that's how much we believe in you that we made that decision as well. So yeah, the Bruins are that's gonna be a tough one, because they went on they spent the money on Zadorov, spent the money on Lindholm, and it's like, how much money did you guys leave for Swayman? Because he's proven time and time again that's an important signing. And if I'm looking at the Bruins right now, they have just over $8 million in cap space. 8.6 is what I saw. And I don't know what exactly they're waiting for with Swayman, because like guy's 25. You're getting like his best years right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing they want to bring him back. He's definitely a priority, I would imagine, at this point. Just, Sweeney hasn't gotten it done yet. But I'm with you. I think at least one of these guys, and Nakash is probably the front runner. If you really want to get cute, Arthur Kaliev is also an RFA that potentially could get dealt. Nick Robertson is still an RFA that we know has asked for a trade that could be dealt. So, yeah, I still think that one of these guys who are without a contract will either hold out or be dealt. I think it's a good chance that it happens. But I was kind of surprised to see how many good RFAs are still unsigned to this point. Like, GM's got to get going. There's some foundational pieces here, like you mentioned. Even like Ryan Lindgren, another guy who's probably should get signed by the Rangers before next season.
Yeah.
Cool. That was 2, right? We did? Yeah. Did you have another one? No, that's it. Perfect. Yeah. Beautiful. So that's it. There's cosign, no sign. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Some good discourse, good discussions. Let us know down below what you think of those cosign, no signs. Do you want to see top 100 by the NHLers? Do you think Matt Murray's going to end up playing a hefty amount of games this year? What about the Matthew Knies contract? Let us know your thoughts on all of that down below. We did want to make sure that we talked about this today, because there was a controversial hire that was made in Edmonton on Wednesday. Stan Bowan, who was the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks during the Kyle Beach situation that had happened, back in, was it 2010? Was it 2010 when that whole thing occurred?
That was
2010. Maybe 2011, 2012.
2010.
2010. Okay, yeah, so it was. So he had obviously lost his job along with Joel Quenneville, and they pretty much cleaned house in Chicago, and anyone who was affiliated with allowing that situation to unfold. And up until about and Joel Quenneville were not eligible to work in the NHL. They had to be cleared by Gary Bettman. And then there was kind of a random tweet, like a news dump kind of thing came through like midway through July that they had been reinstated by Gary Bettman. And today, or Wednesday rather, the Edmonton Oilers announced that they were going to hire Stan Bowan to be their general manager. And we knew that it was going to be controversial no matter where he went, because there's a lot of people out there that believe that Stan Bowman doesn't deserve to be back in the NHL. Both Bowman and Quenneville don't deserve to even be back in the NHL. The fact that he decided to go to Edmonton of all places is an interesting landing spot for me. Not to soften what had happened, but you would think that, much to like how Mike Babcock came back and went to Columbus, a bit of a softer market, maybe Stan Bowman would have went to a less hot market, I guess, where it wouldn't be, talked about or crucified as much as it would be in a Canadian market. Very surprised to see the Edmonton Oilers dip their toes into the Stan Bowman market. What about you?
Yeah, I was surprised about that. I mean, here's the thing. So when you talked about them being reinstated, they did it on July 1st. Like the NHL did their best. Like we know that if you're trying to get news out, it would happen on a day where other things are going on. Like the Jays fired Charlie Montoyo on free agency day. I know because I was working that day and this kind of got thrown out there. And honestly, I thought I started hearing the reports that the Oilers were potentially looking at Bowen because they didn't have a general manager and they needed, like, if they're going to bring someone in, likely someone with some experience. So I started hearing that, honestly, and I hate to say this, I thought that was going to happen. Like that was going to be another news dumpy type of one where, like, during like the Donald Trump, when he was the attempted assassination, I thought maybe that would have been the other news dump.
All right, let's announce it now.
Right? Like people are attention's divided. Like, and people might laugh on that, but it's something that literally they do.
They think about
the news.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't have it. You're reacting to a bigger news, so you throw something smaller out there. Like Hockey Canada, we were talking about, like, when were they going to throw that, like, all that stuff out with those allegations? They were going to try to do it when people aren't expecting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with the Oilers one here, yeah, I'm surprised it's the Oilers, just because, yeah, they're, Jeff Jackson's taken over, right? He's leading the charge here, and like that's his first general manager hire.
And he was doing a good job too as GM. Like he was having a great summer. That's the thing that's so kind of weird about it, is like he was making a lot of really good moves, good signings, good trades, and then all of a sudden he makes this controversial hire with Stan Bowman, and it's really caught the ire of people in Edmonton, and a lot of people, understandably upset by the situation. I'm a believer of second chances, and if it's deserved, I think I should qualify it if it's deserved. And I was listening to Sheldon Kennedy come out and speak about how Stan Bowman has put in the work, says that he's done a lot of work with his group, and believes that his commitment, I guess, to learning from the situation and learning and how to better equip himself if this issue ever were to arise again, how to better handle things. So if Sheldon Kennedy can give him the stamp of approval that he deserves a second chance, who am I to say he doesn't, I suppose. But hopefully he understands that there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on him now. And, it doesn't stop here, right? The education doesn't stop just because you got back into the league. You have to continue forward. And what Sheldon Kennedy did come out and say was, it sounds as though Bowman does plan to continue, to work on things and still continue to work with the Edmonton outreach group to make sure that he continues, to make things right with the community. So it's controversial, obviously, but we'll see what happens. He did come out and say that getting Draisaitl was kind of the first priority for him. I'd imagine that'll definitely be that'll be a tough negotiation. Welcome back to the job. That's gonna be a big stain if he can't get that contract done and dealt with. That's gonna be stressful. Trying to make sure you get Draisaitl locked up long term. It's kind of your first order of business since returning.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on what you were saying with the second chance, like, yeah, I'm of the belief that if somebody's put in the work, understands what they did wrong, like Stan Bowan did, and like I knew as soon as Sheldon Kennedy came out with that statement a few days ago that this was kind of a preemptive for him, for Bowman to eventually return to the league. The other one too is the fact that he spoke to Kyle Beach and kind of, this wasn't going to be something that Kyle Beach was going to find out from a news organization. So there's that. And I think Bowman also is recognizing like this is something he has to live with forever, right? Like it doesn't go away. And maybe I'm thinking some people don't like, they think that by hiring Stan Bowman, the Oilers are like, I don't think that's something that's like, oh, we're hiring him, we think like that's in the past. Like,
Right.
No, that Kyle Beach has to live with that forever. Stan Bowman has to live with that forever. Joe Quenneville has to live with that and I think Aldrich is the other, the guy, like that whole thing. That's
Everyone.
everyone, right? And McIsaac, the president, like those are people who have to live with that forever, right? Like him being hired doesn't. I wouldn't say it. Nothing justifies. It doesn't mean like the whole
doesn't
situation.
vindicate. Doesn't
No,
vindicate.
that's the word. It doesn't vindicate anything. Like these guys are gonna have to live with that, and every decision now, like as a GM, is going to be scrutinized, right? He's going to be under that much more of a microscope on everything he does, going forward. So, yeah, and look, people have a reason to be upset. It's an emotional situation, and if people are saying like you have to, like people need to get over it, like no, they don't have to get over it because there's a lot of emotion involved in a situation like this. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long people are going to be talking about this hire, and then how quickly Bowman tries to get his stamp on this team, because as you said, they got some RFAs they got to sign. They got one of their top players that's going to need a new contract, and another guy who's going to need a new contract in a few years.
Yep. So it's and Bowman has a history of keeping some young pillars around a franchise long term. He's the one who, got Kane his contract, got Taves his contract.
He was the first with the double digit, the $10+ million contract. He started it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no way, I guess, to transition out of that, but we'll see what happens. We'll see where it goes. Yeah. All right, buddy. Anything else you want to mention today before we get out of here?
No, I mean, it's we'll see how much more news. Like now that Bowman's in the picture, like now does that mean the Oilers are going to start being a lot more involved with a lot of news, like a lot of their stuff getting done?
Jeff Jackson was getting things done. Like he wasn't operating without a GM. He was acting as a pretty active GM. He's made two like pretty sizable trades so far.
Yeah, I'll say this. I know for a fact that he said he did not want to tackle the extensions for Draisaitl and McDavid, like Draisaitl. He wanted a GM in there for that, which I'm just also like, you're a hockey agent. Like, contracts.
Yeah.
Like, that's your forte. Like that's what always puzzled me. Like trades I can get. Like agents are not as familiar with that. But signings, this is literally what you've done your whole career.
Yeah. What would you say you do here if you're not doing contracts? But anyways, so we'll see what happens in Edmonton. I was today years old, by the way, when I found out that Cliff Fletcher still works for the Toronto Maple Leafs. How old is this man?
89.
89 years old, and he just extended a contract with the Maple Leafs.
It's one of those guys that's gonna. I think he turns 89 next month, but this is a guy who's gonna have a job for. I'm like surprised he's still working, considering. I know this is probably more of an ambassador type of like thing, but like, dude, how you?
Yeah.
Like at 89 years old, I don't know what I'm gonna be doing at 89. I'm gonna be just happy to be 89, I guess.
But like, bro, if MLSE's just handing out money left, right, and center to people, hello, Dave and I would like an ambassador's role. Huh? Why not? Huh?
Of course.
Anyway, All right, let's get out of here, Dave. Good stuff. We'll do it again tomorrow, but that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show at Locked On Leafs. Be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.